Hi, my name is Michael Adadaji, and today we're going to talk about stages of development and how that relates to a child from the ages of 0 to 7 years of age. Now, this is also part of our truth of everything, so we're just going to put that up here so we never forget what everything is. It's the truth of everything. So when we have a child born, to the formula for the first 7 years, we call that the formative years. In the formative years, from birth to about 6 months is the first stage of development. At this time, the baby has just entered into the world, and the baby has a container. We all have containers. Our containers are our bodies. But the baby has a very small container. That's why when you make a sharp noise or anything like that, the baby gets spooked very, very quickly. At this time, this child needs to bond with the mother. This is the bonding stage as well. This is the bonding stage. And 0 to 6 months, if the bonding stage wasn't done properly, what ends up happening is the child's energy is frightened, but the child has no defenses. A baby has no defenses at all. So what the baby will do is they will look to disappear. And that's how their energy compensates for the trauma of, let's say, the mother yelling at the child, being upset at the child, or at this point upset at the baby. So this energy of disappearing makes the baby, as they become an adult, fragmented. So instead of having a container that can hold, like, let's say, a liquid or hold our energy, the container of this baby is shattered. So this baby, when it grows up, it's already starting with a shattered container. And that's their first 6 months that can happen to the child if it doesn't get proper love, if it doesn't get bonding with the mother. Maybe this child was born into a family from a rape case. Maybe this child was born into a very abusive family. Regardless of how the baby got there, in this 0 to 6 months is when they're supposed to bond with the mother. Now, the next stage of development is from 6 months to a year and a half. And at this stage of development, the child is in the mirroring stage. And in the mirroring stage, the identity of the child is wrapped up in the mother. And you've probably seen instances where a mother can know the baby woke up and they're not even in the same room. They could be in 2 different rooms. And then the mother walks over and sure enough, the baby is awake. They are energetically tied at this stage. If the mother smiles, the baby's going to smile. If the mother frowns, the baby's identity is, oh, we're frowning. And in this stage, you can be overcharged. The mother can be one of those mothers that just dotes on their child so much it just makes them crazy. It can be a distorted mirroring. It could be a under mirroring where the mother is not really paying attention to the child. But everything that happens in the first 7 years of life stays with this person throughout their whole life, unless this is repaired. If it's not repaired, that's where the child is stuck. So if they successfully manage to go from 0 to 6 months, they got proper love and attention, and then maybe there was a traumatic time in the household and the mother had no time for the child, and the child was under mirroring, then the child now, what ends up happening is their container, their energy, their muscles that are starting to grow, instead of having a larger container now, as the child is getting older, they leak. Their body's not formed properly. So this child, one of the damages that would happen is that nothing can ever satisfy this child because they're leaking. And you can see this in an adult very easy. If you ever dealt with, like, let's say, a model, they constantly need reassurance. They constantly need someone to be praising them. And that could be a damage that happened from 6 months to a year and a half, where you can have an endless demand from you to constantly fill them. What I kind of missed out is in the 0 to 6 months, in the bonding stage, if the needs are not met of this child, this baby, what will end up happening is it's disappearing into, like, let's say, the air. So these people can be very creative. They could be writers, they could be singers, and their lives end up being fragmented. Whereas in the mirroring stage, their body is starting to form muscle now, and the container is starting to get stronger, yet it's leaking. So since the container is leaking, you're always filling in this stage. The next stage of development is from 1.5 to 3 years old. And in this stage, it's the anal stage. This is a stage of development where you hear about the terrible twos. Well, actually, the terrible twos are not a bad thing if these stages were done properly. What the terrible twos really come down to is the child is setting up its first boundary. That's why it's saying no. When we have this child, this is the time when the head begins to form on the body. And when the head begins to form on the body, so do the arms and so do the legs. But what happens in the damage here is that the mother yells at this child and says, "Don't move. Run. Don't run. Eat all your food. Go to sleep now. Wake up now." So in a sense, it's telling the child, no, you do not have a head. You cannot have a head. So what ends up happening is the mother, because she's exercising all this control, is literally severing the arms and the legs. And now you're left with a child who is smiling all the time to keep mommy happy, so mommy doesn't hurt the child, and this child has a big no inside. This energy container now becomes overcharged internally, and this person in their distortion looks to have provocation, so to make them move, and they become like a gigantic anchor. Why? Because the anal stage wasn't formed properly. Because the container now is becoming like a pressure cooker holding in all the energy. And these people can get into a pressure cooker relationship with someone, and then all of a sudden it gets where they blow up. And when they blow up, they empty out all the energy that's been stored in here that they've never said no. And that energy now comes out like vomit. This anal phase is a very painful life. They can become workaholics. They cannot experience this world because their head is never outside of the mechanism part of our body. If you look at your torso is kind of set up a lot like a machine. You have the heart's pumping all the time. You got the air coming in, going out. And these people, as they grow up, they identify their lives like that, where they wake up in the morning and they work and work and work, and they come home at night and they pass out. So this damage happens from 1.5 to 3. So now, from 1.5, from 0 to 3 years old, we are in the formation of the body. And at the 3-year-old mark, something else happens. You can make from 3 to 7, 2 different types of energy left into the development. So from 3 to 5 is the pre-genital stage. And this is a very important stage, because if the child gets to 3 years old, its head now properly formed, where it knows no and it's starting to have its own boundaries, the next stage is the pregenital stage. And this is when the child has to interact, and this is very important, with the opposite sex parent. This is the most important relationship for this time in development. Now, that means that if it's a daughter, she is not going to become a woman because of the mother. She's going to become a woman because of her relationship with the father. If this is not done properly, then you'll see what's going to come in a second. So if it is a son, his relationship with his mother has to evolve now, because up until this point, the body is formed. After this point, after the 3-year-old mark, this person now has to be introduced to the opposite sex. So what happens here is how you connect to creativity, because at this point is so critical, because this is the time when the child wants to show mommy and daddy, or at this point wants to show their drawings. So they must connect to something that is creative with their hands. And what do? They draw. And they draw for the opposite sex parent. So let's say it's a daughter. At this point, she's going to draw something and she's going to want her father to see it. Well, what if he's busy now and he's not around and he doesn't have time for her? Or you have the mother now. The mother has 2 children, and this is maybe the older of the 2, for instance, and the mother doesn't have enough time. So the mother now is not really paying attention to the drawing. Well, when that happens, this is what the energy of the child turns into. And the child is here, the torso, and then it has an elongated head structure. This is what ends up happening to this child. The head structure becomes elongated because in the body it's still holding on to the drawing that mommy and daddy never appreciated. This disconnect is where the inflated ego comes in. This disconnect is also where they sacrifice the body, they sacrifice humanity, and they go for law, or they go for the I am. This person identifies with the I am. They say they are the I am. They say that they're in charge. And this is a byproduct because no one observed their creativity. Now we're going to go into each one of these in greater detail, because this is really the beginning of the development of the person. And if the person is leaving humanity to go for control, there's a lot of problems there. Well, the next one is called the genital stage. The genital stage is from 5 to 7 years old. And as you can see, pregenital and genital are very similar, because this is the introduction to the opposite sex, or the introduction to creativity, and it needs to be expressed with drawing. Well, in the genital stage, what's magnified here is the child's sexuality. And what happens here is, to have healthy relationships when this child gets older, it has to bond with the opposite sex and do things together. Daddy taking his daughter for ice cream, them spending time with each other. Because if this is not done properly, then what's going to end up happening is that they're going to create dysfunctional relationships. Now these two are tied with each other. So again, what happens from 3 to 5 is just magnified more at 5 to 7. How damage occurs here is the opposite sex parent is actually intimidated by the child's sexuality. And in this intimidation, what the child does to protect itself, just like in this place to protect itself from its pain, the child goes upward to the head. In this place, the child becomes frozen. So the person now has a body, and this body might look perfect on the outside because these people are usually, the body's pretty formed. However, they don't live in their body. They must disconnect, in this case, from their body because their body has energy they do not want to have any part of. So the body's frozen. This person is frozen. As they get older, they could be very critical. They could be super neat freaks. They could be very organized. They could have every pencil and paper on a desk perfectly lined up. But this is not because they're clean or neat. This is because they're finding a rigidity in their outer world because they're trying to escape the frozenness of their inner sexuality. These stages of development really need a lot of time to break them down. How they interact with different people. How a damage here, compounded with a damage here, can create someone's life that could be filled with mental anger and wanting to control. Most of the atrocities that happen in our world are isolated here and here. Because when this head becomes inflated, it seeks control for the fact of control here, and in here it seeks control because of arrogance. Because remember, their body is formed. They look down on the rest of these people, saying, look, I'm perfect, you got to be perfect too. When you see someone and you interact with them, depending on where your personal, let's say, parental guidance wasn't done properly, or your interaction with your caregiver from 0 to 7 can interact with their, distortion that happened from 0 to 7 years of age. So what does that mean? That means that their interactions with different blocks that are kind of look like on the surface that they depend on each other, but really it's just part of the distortion. So for today, this is a very brief, very broad stages of a development. And again, my name is Michael Hidadaji. And we're going to expand on every one of these. And again, we might redo this one because, maybe I forgot a few things to add to it. We can add it in the next time. So we hope you enjoy these videos, and you can always find more information on my website. Thank you.